Greetings historians, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to have another video on Alexander III. This is a key building block of the Russia and Revolution EdXL International A-Level course. We're going to be dealing with the question today, was Alexander III's reign wholly repressive? Whenever there's exam questions on this part of the paper, it is basically always just a rewording of this question. It's always, were there positives to Alexander III's reign? Was he completely repressive? Was he a bit of a reformer? Basically, was Alexander III all bad, or was there some stuff that was actually alright about him? The thing I've included here is the bit of a hook. If you imagine, like in the classic sitcoms, you hear the record scratch. Yeah, that's me, Nicholas Romanov. This is a picture of him under house arrest, being escorted out by some Bolshevik guards who were sat in the background. You can tell he's not been treated very well, because look at the bags under his eyes, look how long his beard and mustache is. And at the start of 1917, he was Tsar, he was paramount leader of Russia. By the end of 1917, as you can see, he's under house arrest. If you're wondering how he got there, it does actually all kind of start with his dad, because Alexander III's reign undoubtedly set Nicholas up for failure and is kind of the reason that Nicholas ended up going from a golden throne to a tree stump being watched by a few Bolshevik guards. So firstly, Alexander III's personality is important. If you imagine Nicholas, good, well done. Now imagine just the complete opposite. It is hilarious that these two are even related. This is the biggest father-son difference since Tom and Chet Hanks, maybe. Alexander III and Nicholas II. So he was notoriously aggressive, he was very intimidating, he hated the court culture of the Russian aristocracy, so the same stuff that Nicholas loves, the partying, the banquets, the trips to foreign countries, Alexander III famously hates all of it. He surrounds himself with a very small group of advisors, and he just will not suffer the sort of Downton Abbey style of the Russian aristocracy. He is a deeply, deeply conservative man, meaning that he wants Russia to stay the same. He is a Slavophile to the nth degree. And what you've really got to think with Alexander III is his dad was killed after he gave the people some freedom. The lesson Alexander III and his tutor took from this is, you gave the Russian people an inch and they took a mile. You tried to be nice to them and they responded to that kindness by throwing a bomb at you and blowing up your carriage. So he is very much of the opinion that Russia needs to stay the same always. Now, he had the same tutor as Nicholas II. Pobedonostsev was his tutor. I know I said that Alexander III was the Slavophile to the nth degree, but Pobedonostsev is really the brains behind Russian Tsarism as a political concept. He famously said that democracy was the greatest lie of our time. He is someone who has put the idea into Alexander III and Nicholas II's brain that absolute monarchy is the best form of government and also the only system of government that is going to be possible in Russia. If you think they deeply believe in this whole dark masses idea, they're terrified of their own people. They don't think that their people can be trusted with freedom, so they must be ruled repressively. Figes, everyone's favourite post-revisionist, paraphrasing his quote here, but he describes Alexander III as having an iron will. Nicholas did not have an iron will, so the contrast between them is Alexander III had the stomach to be an absolute monarch. He was a tough guy, he was willing to shout people down, he was willing to take on the responsibilities of an absolute autocrat, whereas Nicholas sort of believed that he had to, but just didn't have that temperament. And then I think the thing that's funniest about them is you can see from this picture how much Alexander III just hates being within 5 feet of Nicholas. And Nicholas is a short king. He's an unbothered king. He stands a mean 5'7", which I think is a pretty good height for a person, especially a history teacher. But Alexander III was 6'4", which at the time, late 1800s, is absolutely insane. So there's two parts of Alexander III's regime, his reign. There is the reaction and then there's the reform. Here's a joke. Why was Alexander III a great chemist? Because his solution was a reaction. You know, normally I'm used to people laughing here, so I just took a quick applause break there. Thank you, everyone. So in general, Alexander III understandably was not a fan of reform. His dad gave some freedom to the people, he emancipated the serfs, he relaxed universities, he gave some form of self-government to peasants, and he is rewarded by the people's will chucking a grenade into his car, so he does not think that the Russian people should be given any reforms. So he does a few things. One, he introduces these people called land captains. This is an attempt to reduce peasant self-government, so people from the towns and the cities, the nobility, go to the peasants and reduce their autonomy, their right to rule over themselves. Obviously, this is extremely popular with the peasants. Oh wait, no, it's not. It's actually really unpopular. He also basically undoes everything that Alexander II did in terms of censorship. Universities in particular are targeted. It's obvious to see why. The people that killed Alexander II were all university students who were radicalized by reading foreign texts and foreign ideas. So he clamps down on the universities and stops foreign texts being taught. Also makes sure that a lot of radical kids in universities are kicked out. Russification is massively increased by Alexander III. He speeds up the Russifrustration of Russification. The Baltics, Poland and Finland are especially targeted by this to put down the growing nationalist movements, because Alexander III believes that the Russian Empire needs to be held together by an iron fist, so they can't have any independence movements. Anti-Semitism is a huge part of Alexander III's regime. Pogroms have always happened in Russia, pogroms being the sort of specific targeting of Jewish communities. They've always happened, but Alexander III actually actively encourages them. He does the May laws, which says that Jewish people in the Russian Empire are not allowed to live beyond what was called the Pale of Settlement, which is in modern-day Ukraine. The Okhrana is massively expanded under Alexander III. He gives it extra powers to infiltrate radical groups like the SRs, the SDs, and nationalists, and they do an amazing job of this, as I've talked about in my other videos. The thing to think about with Alexander III is, in the short term, his reaction was really successful, because it took Russia from a country that had just had its monarch assassinated to one that was extremely stable. But in the long term, it created a series of problems for his successor, Nicholas II, in that it created more unrest and hatred for the Tsarist regime in the countryside, more unrest and hatred for the Tsarist regime amongst the liberal intelligentsia, way more hatred amongst minority groups, and all of this will just explode for Nicholas in 1905. It's no wonder that the 1905 and 1917 revolutions are led by workers, peasants, minority groups. They have been looking for an opportunity to destroy the Tsarist regime since Alexander III reacted so strongly. But to give both sides of the argument, you could also argue that Alexander II the third wasn't all bad, because he did actually do some reformist measures, kind of. The main thing is Sergei Witta was his finance minister. His finance minister, his transport minister, and Sergei Witta oversaw the great spurt of the late 1890s. This is where you come to quite an interesting idea, which is, just because Alexander III was anti-Westernization doesn't mean that he was anti-modernization, because he gave Witta free rein, really, to modernize the economy of the Russian Empire. Witta is the guy who oversees the Trans-Siberian Railway. He attracts foreign capital from Britain, France to fund new factories. He focuses on heavy industries, things like coal, iron, steel, and oil, all double in output because of Witta. He puts Russia to the gold standard, which makes it more attractive for foreign investors. All of this stuff is really, really progressive for the time, and Witta, even in his memoirs, said it was his task to drag Russia into modernity. Alexander III, did he have anything to do with that? Well, he didn't stop Witta from doing it, so maybe you could argue that he wasn't wholly repressive just because he allowed Witta some autonomy there. Also, he is known as the peacemaker because he didn't start wars with any other countries. not exactly the sort of thing he should be given high fives for, just because he didn't start a war and every other Russian Tsar has done. He does reform the Russian social fabric in a way, because a supporter of Alexander III might argue that all he did was repress terrorist groups such as the SR and the SDs. That's not necessarily repressive, that's just encouraging social order. He also didn't reintroduce serfdom, so he did reduce some peasant autonomy, but he could have put them back into serfdom after Alexander II emancipated them, but he didn't, so does that show that he's not wholly repressive? Richard Pipes. God, that'd be a good name for a plumber, wouldn't it? Pipes. Richard Pipes. Richard Pipes, the liberal historian, said that Alexander III's reign was a time of peace and progress. So he, the liberal historian, is arguing that it was not wholly repressive because of the peace, socially, politically, and the progress economically that happened under Alexander III. So, what do you think? In your essays on this topic, all it will ever ask you is, was his reign wholly repressive or was it somewhat reformatory? Hopefully this video has given you a good idea as to what you would say if you were given one of those questions. I'm losing the train of thought, but you know who wasn't losing the train of thought? Sergei Witta and the Trans-Siberian Railway. Smash the like button, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you to all the Tully gang who have subscribed. Keep on historying. Thank you.